This is a quick response video to Fred, that's Conference Report, who posted a couple of videos in the last couple of days on pantheism being evil, and his most recent one was to be serious. And Fred, I apologize for taking some of this out of context. I realize that this is out of context, but I want you just to hear how this sounds out of context. Just imagine some person who hasn't watched any of your videos, and this is what they hear, okay?
Everything is indifferent. I mean, that absolutely captures my position. Everything is indifferent. And because it's indifferent, it's meaningless, in my view, to take a reverential attitude to it, to take an attitude of awe toward it, to take an attitude of worship toward it. Any of those attitudes, I would say, emerge from the experiences. They're not things that we bring to it. As I said in an earlier comment, I don't think the universe or nature is worthy of reverence or worthy of positive value. I think there are experiences that nature gives us which give meaning to our understanding of terms like value and worth. The universe does not come pre-formed, either as, in my opinion, either as positive or negative. Those terms emerge out of our embodiment and our relationship to it. And a lot of that embodiment is negative. I'm sorry, but the evolution, yes, of course, I'm oversimplifying the evolutionary narrative. I understand that. But it is driven by some fairly hard taskmasters. I'm sure you know that. It is driven by some very difficult and painful and there's a lot of suffering around, and the pleasures there too. They're just part of the indifference of the universe. Pleasures and all of the incredibly complex feelings that comes with being human are undoubtedly a product of that very relationship. So I'm being.
Okay, I guess and Fred sort of goes off into how it's being overly simplistic. I guess from my own perspective, I found these couple of videos to be very troubling, or at least difficult for me to follow. And I think, some of the concerns I would try to register, in different ways. One is, the first thing I would want to say is, I always think of this line by Henry Miller in his Tropic of Cancer, where he says, "I can't get it out of my mind what a discrepancy there is between ideas and living." I mean, I think if all of life were nothing but an idea, then I think I would understand the concern over trying to think it through with all of its clarity to the end. But life isn't just a thought. And so there's something sort of deceptive about trying to think about what life is, because thought is just such a small part of what life is. Okay, so even given that, I think the concern that I have is, first off, I would like to know, Fred, what is that subspecies of pantheism which you're giving allowances for? I mean, you seem to be suggesting that it's certain kinds of pantheists. There are certain people who hold a particular kind of pantheism that you find most troubling. Could you, just for the sake of argument, offer up, for charity's sake, what would be the kind of pantheism that you could have some sort of sympathies for? I mean, if there is something like the bad pantheist out there, well, what is the good pantheist? What does this person look like? Or, I mean, is that going to just inch over into, well, it's all just crap? I mean, what would it look like? Because for me, I think, yeah, some of the references that you were giving to, like, awe and sacredness, the phraseology was a little bit rough there. I mean, it seemed odd to talk about emerging from our experience, but not to. It's because experience already is a term that registers the coordination or the codependency between the human and what we call the world. I mean, it's odd to even talk about the world as being one way or another way, and then humans being something else. I mean, we are something of the earth. We're a place and moment of it. And so there's something kind of ironic about the concern over anthropomorphism. That is, what could be more anthropomorphic than the desire to not be anthropomorphic? I mean, it's really, I mean, humans, if you read Nietzsche's Truth and Lies in the Ultramoral Sense, he's got this wonderful point about the gnat You know, I mean, even though he says gnats feel themselves to fly around the universe with the same sort of pathos that humans do, I don't think he's, he doesn't, Nietzsche doesn't seem to recognize the degree to which we're imagining gnats, which is one of the more interesting things about humans. It's not just that we're anthropocentric, it's that we're non-egocentric in the way that the rest of the animal kingdom seems to be. So there's something very, again, very ironic there. And this is why, for me, the issue is of self-relation. The problem is, how did nature evolve that organism that could have possible self-relation? And what does self-relation mean? Is self-relation a kind of rare achievement? And it's something that, I guess, in the way one comes to relate to oneself, there is great possibility of changing the flavor and the character and even the tenor of suffering. That is, suffering itself is not a fact in the world. It is an experience. It's an embodied experience. See, now, Fred, in your video, it's sort of like when you were talking about how our values are always embodied values. It's as if you're imagining, and I understand, I'm not being critical of it, but it's as if you're imagining some boogeyman specter out there who's holding to a belief in disembodied values or some sort of Platonic values that are just there in the world. But if a person doesn't hold any of those, if a person says, well, yes, of course the values are embodied, all values are embodied, we are bodies, but that's the way the earth has made room for valuing. And again, now see, here's where the question is going to see. I think what you're going to do is, if you want to be critical of my position here, you're going to suggest that I'm over unifying and anthropomorphizing this thing called Earth and giving it some sort of agency. And I'm suggesting that there is something called, I don't know, the life force, which I guess gave releasement to all of these diverse and, I don't know, the ranges of kinds of organisms that open to the world. And as much as I want to say, yes, that's a problem, I don't think we want to have some grand wearer of many masks that's sort of controlling the scene or calling the shots. But I think we do want to, from my perspective, open to the kind of mystery that all of this is. And I don't know if I would call myself a pantheist. I guess I do have similar concerns, I think, to some of the concerns you have, which is this. It's a taking of Christian notions of God, of this sort of omnipotent, omnibenevolent, omniscient being, and then saying, yeah, we're all that too. Well, then it becomes hocus pocus distributed down so that everyone sort of has these super fantastical powers or something like this. I think if that's the concern, I really do agree with it. But there are different ways to come at it. I mean, Joseph Campbell has this wonderful line where Campbell talks about this young man who went to India, and in India he discovered that he was God, and he had the realization. He said, I am the self, I'm the true self. And he was so overwhelmed by the enlightenment that on the way home he kept thinking to himself, I am the cosmos, I am the true self. And as he was having this sort of revelatory thought, a man on an elephant was on top of the elephant screaming, look out, get out of the way, wild elephant, get out of the way. And the guy, sort of hearing this, thinks, what, me, God, I get out of the way for an elephant? No. And all of a sudden the elephant comes and he tosses him into the ditch, and the guy lands on his head and suddenly goes back to his guru and says, Guru, I don't know what happened. I had my moment of enlightenment, and the elephant threw me in the ditch. And the guru says to him, well, you discovered that you were God, correct? And the guy says, yeah. And he says, well, you realize that all things are God, right? And he says, yes. And he says, well, then why didn't you listen to God telling you to get out of the way? There was a wild elephant. See, I think there's something that needs to be reintroduced that distributes this notion of a kind of pantheism without giving those Christian or monotheistic overtones that lead to a privileging of one person and a sort of, well, I'm special and other people aren't, sort of thing. Okay, I think for me, the way to really come into this, though, is to go back to this issue of the life force. And is there something like the impetus toward life? the yearning for experience. And this, I think, is where I'm really going to part ways with you. And this is where I would like to see some response. And this is maybe, in addition to the question of what is a pantheism that you would find sympathetic or that you could find yourself having sympathies for. I think, from my own perspective, this issue that you and Gary seem to be in agreement upon, that we are quotes, and I feel bad if I'm being too simplistic here, but we're basically machines that reproduce and consume and reproduce, and that's really the deal. No, 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 no. I think if that were the case, we wouldn't see the diversity that we see in the world. I think biodiversity is the issue, and particular kinds of biodiversity in particular. The work of Hans Jonas, I would say, is really the key here. The question is there in fact a kind of growth in the range of experience, the very range of possible experiences that drift from first plant life or vegetative life, just blanketly, and then from there the emergence of various forms of insects, animality, and then ultimately all the way to human, higher mammals. It would seem that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the universe is not up to just this one thing about reproducing and continuing. It seems to be on a mission of widening the expanse of its capacities for mediation. It seems like that seems to be part of it. Now, if it wouldn't be that, how else could we account for what looks like not a progression or a teleology of progress, right? I don't think that's what we're seeing, but I think in the sense of a betterment. It's not like, oh yes, things are getting better, but I think it's hard to deny. Okay, I mean, maybe it is. For me, it would be hard to deny that nature seems to give a, when we step back and look at it, a desire, a a yearning, an impulse, I'm not sure what the right word is, but for expanded ranges of mediacy. That is, the kinds of mediacy that are open to plant life. Uh, they're really, they're open to maybe, a plant can behave, but they're open to the sense of the sun. They can feel, or if anyway, they can react to the water around them. I mean, in some way, there is a non-feeling sensual bond that the plant has with its immediate environment, and it behaves in accordance with it. That plant can thrive. It can go through its ontogenesis with a kind of a health and a vigor, or it can be stunted. Its growth can be affected. Its relation can be affected. As we move up toward animals, they rove over space. They, as you move, especially up into higher mammals, they have senses of feelings and emotion and desire. And as you would point out, Fred, yes, it becomes more chancy. It becomes more risky. See, that's the whole deal. I mean, think of the horrifyingness that sort of gets implied as you move from plant life to animal life. I mean, not only do plants have a a non-knowledge of other organisms coming to devour them, but those plants, they don't have distant desires. They don't have yearnings for food. They don't have appetites that need to be satisfied. When we move to the animal world, animals have appetites. They can feel the hunger for food and feel the scarceness of it, look for it, and then they can also feel a predator, hunt them down, and feel to flee from it. Now, by the time you get to the human realm, which I do think it's continuous with evolution. It's not that it's not natural. It's not that it's somehow from on high. But I think people who don't want to acknowledge the qualitative leap that somehow occurred, whether you want to call it a missing link, whether you want to call it a technological evolution that somehow happened and acted back upon people, for some reason, I'm not sure why, humans do seem to have certain characteristics that do separate them off. And there's a whole bunch of them. It has to do with non-egocentricity, with inclinations toward a cooperation which recognizes the intentions of the particular other. It has to do with image making. It has to do with abstractions and mediacy by abstraction. It has a lot to do with the basic experience of freedom. And all of these come at a hefty price. But it's as if nature itself, or the life force of the earth, or something like, I don't know, again, just life itself, seems to be yearning for greater and greater degrees of riskiness, of chanciness, of distant desires, and of fears and agonies and anxieties, but of richer fulfillments, of greater depths of love, of greater depths of appreciation, and of greater senses of awe and mystery for the cosmos. I think if if some higher animals can occasionally be like confused or momentarily baffled, the human can open to the awe of the mystery of their own origins. And this problem of self-relation, for me, really is the key. See, I think this is where something like prayer becomes possible. But it depends on the particular kind of prayer. It's not like prayer like, oh God, come and spite my enemies, or cure me from cancer or something like this. I think prayers that are performed as a kind of practice of self-relation, prayers for strength, prayers for courage, prayers for forgiveness, where a person recognizes him or herself as a momentary fragment of a large cosmic process, and realizes the utter dependence of themselves upon all kinds of factors that are beyond their control. They start to identify themselves with a uniqueness, but a uniqueness embedded within a socio-historical uniqueness and a cosmic uniqueness, where the world itself, in all of its unfolding, has a kind of an interrelation that makes self-relation have a kind of meaning. And to say that that's anthropomorphic, or to say that what you're really doing here is taking your own human experience and projecting it into the world, well, no, that is what the world has done. The world has somehow made possible, has released those kinds of valuations that we call human experiences of concern, of an ethics, of, I guess, deliberation and choice in a kind of plasticity that doesn't seem to be burdening the other animals. The other animals don't seem to be burdened by conscience and by self-relation in the same way that we are. I guess the point that I'm trying to raise here is that there seem to be, and on two fronts here, my concerns with Fred and his pantheism is evil. One is the reductive sense of what exactly do you mean by pantheism? Are there any forms of pantheism that you do find sympathetic, and what exactly would that look like? And then the more, I guess, robust one is one, I guess, that's in a conversation. I don't want to get into more conversations with Gary. I have nothing against Gary. I've tried to have conversations with him. He just seems unwilling to entertain the possibility that life itself does show a range of mediacy and looks like it's evolving to include more and more experience within each organism. It's as if evolution has made possible organisms that are able to, are expanded in their sense of space and in their sense of time, and that itself seems like more than just reproducing. I mean, if reproducing were all that were, if we were just machines to reproduce, then it would seem like cockroaches were the most successful. And why would nature have evolved past that? Now, if you say, well, it was just a fluke and it was just a luxury, that seems not correct. No, 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 no. If it were just a fluke, we wouldn't see the temporal order that it is. See, I think there's something that would be untrue about that, even if we limit it to something like the evolution of human consciousness in human history, because human consciousness is itself a natural phenomenon. Okay, at any rate, those are some concerns that I have. Fred, I enjoyed your video. I did have a little concern, and I don't mean to represent your view, but I wanted to just open with that. And okay, hope everyone is well. Thanks.